Terry Scott was a stalwart of British farce on stage and screen, and became renowned as one of the great pantomime dames. But he reached the peak of his fame in the 1970s and 80s, playing the bumbling suburban husband in Terry and June.
Do you accept credit cards?
The real Terry was far more complex. He was a perfectionist who could be difficult to work with. His private life was rocked by scandal, and he twice fought life-threatening illnesses. But throughout his career, his energy and enthusiasm for performing never flagged. Born on the 4th of May 1927, Terry started life as Owen John Scott. He was brought up on Tucker Street in Watford and was the youngest of 3 children, but the death from bronchitis of his older brother Aubrey at the age of 6 was to have a big influence on his childhood.
I think he was a more treasured son as their only son remaining, and I think Dad felt that he needed to make up for that somehow, you know, be two boys in the house.
Another factor that made Terry outgoing as a child was a slight deafness which he inherited from his father and would eventually pass on to 2 of his own children.
There was a little bit of deafness even when he was young. I think, you know, he worked hard to get a lot of attention, and he would get kids together and play jokes and make a party happen, make things happen. You know, that was what he did, you know, from an early age.
The excitable little boy was a persona Terry would later develop into one of his most enduring comedy creations.
Who put salt in the sugar bowl?
He played the character on stage, in TV commercials, and for the song.
My brother.
We always liked it when we were growing up, and he would do the little boy voice. Certainly I did anyway. I thought it was really quite sweet.
I've always understood that the song My Brother and the character of the schoolboy, there was some connection between when his brother died, you know, and it was almost like it was Aubrey sort of making the song, but that's just my take on it.
Terry's first steps in show business came while doing national service in the Navy at the end of World War II. He performed stand-up comedy in cabaret and variety shows. But when he was demobbed in 1947, he tried to follow a more orthodox career.
When he came out of the Navy, I think the next thing was, no, got to do the normal thing, go and train to be an accountant and do a normal job. And of course, he did that for a bit, but very quickly he needed to expand on his creativity, and he moved on and out.
A spell on the radio on shows like Workers' Playtime was followed by appearances on television. Then, in the late 1950s, Terry got his break in farce when he joined the Whitehall Theatre Company.
Mr. X! Telephone! He came and auditioned, and he was easily the funniest person who actually read at the audition.
Your makeup was atrocious, your clothes indescribable, your voice abominable, and your performance diabolical! Otherwise, all right.
He had a very expressive face. It was a bit like a hot cross bun, without the marking.
It led to Terry gaining a reputation for being a bit difficult to work with.
He was a perfectionist. He wanted everything to be right. And that, I think, is to do with impatience. You know, I can get it right, why can't they?
Is something annoying you?
And that was possibly a flaw.
In the summer of 1957, Terry was appearing in Scarborough when he met dancer Margaret Pollen.
Mum was rehearsing, dancing on the stage, and Dad came in late and saw her, and his jaw was slowly dropping. So I think he fell in love with her. I think it was about 3 weeks of courting before Dad said, well, you're going to marry me, aren't you? Okay, fine.
Terry and Maggie set up home in Whitley in Surrey and had 4 daughters, Sarah, Nicola, Lindsay and Ali.
Thank you, madam. No quarrelling today. Not too much trouble for Mum. Promise?
Are we allowed to wait up for the cooker?
No. Bed, early bed.
If he had more energy, so it would be depending on what the nature of the work was, then he take us out to go to the seaside or come up to London for a visit or go and see a show. And then he'd be, he'd have the energy to be funny within the family. So it would be very, very much dependent on what was going on at the time work-wise.
Dad was like anybody. Some days Dad was jokey and loud, and other days Dad'd be quiet because he'd be thinking about work. And he did work really hard. But he was good fun, and he loved children, and in many ways was a big child himself.
Terry's childlike qualities found their natural home in pantomime, where he became legendary as a Dane.
What a good-looking lot! How am I looking? Who said fat?
It was just that sort of knockabout humour which would endear Terry to the nation over the next 2... By the mid-1960s, Terry Scott had established himself as a fine comedy actor on stage and television.
Can I help you?
Oh, yes, I hope so, yes.
It's antenatal day today, gentlemen. You're not antenatal, are you?
Good heavens, no, we're all for it.
But it was in 1968, when he joined the Carry On team, that Terry became a household name, playing leading roles in some of their most memorable films.
He was remarkably good as a bullying heavy, which of course you require in farce.
And what, may I ask, is that thing doing in there?
As kids, the Carry On films were slightly squeamish for us because they were a bit raunchy.
It keeps my dangler warm.
Give it here! For the last time, stop calling it a dangler! It's a sporran!
Seeing your dad doing the Carry On Up the Jungle, where he's being Tarzan. And we just go, oh my God, Dad, no, please.
I'm a woman.
Woman.
We were introduced on the set, and he looked a little bit alarmed because I was the new girl on the block. They were all very famous in the Carry On team at that time, apart from myself, and I think he was just so relieved that I knew my lines.
Do we have to go that way, Ark?
Not to worry, I show you. You hold to me tight.
But we were fitted with harnesses which had great big hooks in our crutches, and then we were hooked to the ropes and, sent spinning off into the trees.
There!
After we'd been wearing these things for a few hours, we were both really unable to walk, and we got sort of sores, and we had to go straight to first aid to be given copious amounts of Savlon and talcum powder. And I remember Terry saying to me, I hope you didn't want any children.
At the same time as his film career was taking off, Terry was also working on a new sketch show for TV called Scott On. It was during the making of that series that Terry first worked with June Whitfield.
The first time I met Terry, I was slightly in awe because I knew he was very established and I certainly wasn't.
Sex is a terribly important thing, isn't it, Heath?
Oh, yeah.
And apparently when I left, Terry said, she'll do.
I could have married anyone I pleased.
Yes, but you didn't please anyone.
They worked so well together that when Terry had an idea for a sitcom about a couple whose kids have grown up and left home, June was the obvious choice to play his wife.
She's probably some frustrated old spinster that doesn't know the first thing about marriage.
Who does?
Well, we do. There's not much you don't know after 23 years of it.
No, dear, except that it happens to be 24.
Happy Ever After ran for 5 years, but a writer's dispute meant that in 1979, the programme had to have a change of name. The first series of Terry and June went on air in October of that year, but it could very easily have been the last.
Dad had had a hemorrhage, and in them taking him in because of that, they discovered that he had an aneurysm, which, an aneurysm, if it bursts, basically, you've had it, so they have to operate.
And I went to see him in hospital after the operation, and he said, yeah, well, they opened up my brain and let some of the air out.
When Terry returned to work the following year, his performance had lost none of its energy.
Bouncy, bouncy, bouncy. Into the top hat.
The show was regularly getting audiences of 15 million viewers, and Terry and June became one of the nation's most recognizable couples. The marriage to June was an act, but many of Terry's on-screen quirks were based on real life.
You name it, I'll catch it.
You've never done it before.
Yeah, well, the fish aren't to know that, are they?
Dad had that same thing as he did in the TV programme. He had that same sort of, got this idea, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it 110%.
Well, I know you and your sudden ideas. It's always a case of, come on, June, let's do that tomorrow. And then the next day, it's, oh, June, why did you make me do that?
He went through phases in his life when he'd go running and things like that, and then he'd not go running, but he would try. He would try and stay physically fit.
He would go through quite a routine of going for a jog, but he would put plastics on. He'd put bells on his ankles because one of the dogs that we had gone blind, so she would go running with him and so she could follow him. And then he'd come back and then he'd do press-ups. 1. And then the next thing he'd do is he'd have a rump steak, an enormous salad, but beautiful salad, and a glass of champagne. And that was Dad detoxing, and I thought...
In 1987, despite its ongoing popularity, Terry and June was axed.
There just wasn't any room for it anymore. Everything became in your face. And so now we have a lot of bonking shows and a lot of violent shows and a lot of audience participation shows. But we don't have a lot of gentle comedy.
The end of Terry and June coincided with revelations about Terry's own marriage being printed in the newspapers.
Mum and Dad had a marriage that, they had an understanding, and but part of the deal wasn't that it would be out in the press. And so that was pretty earth-shattering for all of the family. And I think Dad was filled with remorse that it had got out. And then, literally around the same time, was diagnosed with cancer. And he just, he just plummeted, really. He just went a bit depressive, a bit manic. He just kind of was not a happy man, not at all. Yeah.
Terry fought the illness for 7 years. However, he kept on working both in theatre and as the voice of Penfold in the cartoon Danger Mouse.
He wasn't somebody to sit about feeling sorry for himself. He kept active.
He wouldn't let on to us that he thought he was dying. We wouldn't let on to him that we thought he was dying. There was kind of this unspoken silence going on. And, but there was a calm. And in that, things dropped away. It's quite beautiful, really. And I remember him saying, those difficulties in life, I just think of them as an inconvenience. And that was his sort of way of thinking about it. Things dropped away, yeah.
I do remember Terry would sing louder than anybody else, which was slightly embarrassing at times. And I know at his funeral, I think that's what suddenly upset me more than anything, because I remembered how, Terry would be absolutely belting out the hymns in the church, and he wouldn't be doing it anymore.
Kok jadi begitu, kok kamu gitu, kok jadi cemburu pada dirinya. dia. La 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 la, aku berpasrah. La 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 la, cuma si dia. La 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 la, tempatku bermanja. Duh mas, Kang Mas, ngene ra sibuk kepada dokter, membuat bulu dicangkokkan. Karena bagi kaum Hawa, bulu itu keindahan. Ramai di dunia sekarang pasaran bulu. Setiap tahun katanya diperagakan. Orang bisa jadi kaya gara-gara bisnis bulu. Sampai ada pengusaha bikin bulu mata palsu. Hingga sibuk kepada dokter, membuat bulu cangkokkan. Karena bagi kaum Hawa, bulu itu keindahan. Ramai di dunia sekarang pasaran bulu. Setiap tahun katanya diperagakan. Bulu macan, bulu hewan paling mahal harganya. Para artis di Eropa, baju bulu idolanya. Hanya dipakai jikalau di musim dingin, dan tubuh akan terlindung dari masuk angin. Berputar-putar di depan kaca, bersolek diri agar lebih cantik. Karena abang akan datang ke rumahku, mengajakku jalan-jalan malam minggu. Tapi mengapa abang tak datang, membuat aku resah gelisah, berdiri salah, duduk salah. Karena abang, semua karena abang, semua karena abang. hati ini. Biasanya abang tak begini, tepat janji juga tepat waktu. Malam minggu jadi kelabu. Sebab sampai mati ku tetap setia, walaupun harus aku menderita. Cintaku padamu bagai sepasang sepatu yang tiada mungkin terpakai satu. Ada engkau pasti ada aku, kemana saja kita kan bersatu. Seandainya matamu sudah tak dapat melihat diriku, rela kau jadikan tongkat. Hidup ataupun mati, aku rela menjalani sebagai bukti cintaku yang suci. Bukan alasan wajah ataupun harta, namun ku terima apa adanya. Ada engkau pasti ada aku, kemana saja kita kan bersatu. Seandainya matamu sudah tak dapat melihat diriku, rela kau jadikan tongkat. Hidup ataupun mati, aku rela menjalani sebagai bukti cintaku yang suci. Bukan alasan wajah ataupun harta, namun ku terima apa adanya. bersaudara. Kedua-duanya mencintai diriku, karena hatiku cuma ada satu. Tak mungkin keduanya dapat memiliki. Aku pun rela berpisah denganmu. Aku pun rela berpisah denganmu. Aduh Bang Umar, aduh Bang Amir. Sejuta bunga cinta telah kau berikan, harum mewangi bagai di dalam mimpi. Sebagai tanda cinta kepada diriku yang telah lama terpendam di dalam hati. Itu semua aku tak sanggup, aku tak mampu untuk menerima. Aduh Bang Umar, aduh Bang Amir. Sejuta bunga cinta telah kau beri. kini sudah hidupku terasa hampa. Setegarnya gunung salju pastikan lebur juga apabila terik mentari mencekam kabut sepiku. Setulus hati meminta doa restu darimu untuk merajut benang baru mengganti benang yang lama. Diriku masih ingin disayang seperti dulu kita berdua. Dunia fana kita berpisah, di surga nanti bertemu jua.